Welcome to another edition of Mongols brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network. I'm Mike. With me is Kev, Josh, Liz, Laura, Ellen, Justin, Steve. There's a lot of things on the Hounds fans' minds at the moment, and we're briefly going to look back on what was before talking about what could possibly be. So let's go. Laura Ellen miraculously appeared. The intro music was played. It's like you heard it and you just came running.
I wish that were the case, but
She's
Well,
we lost Kevin.
He's here, but he's not here. No, he's just like looking at his microphone. So I don't think he's actually here. I'll probably jump back on. We'll get him. No big deal. Guys, what's going on? I feel like I haven't talked to everybody in like forever. This is great. Justin, Laura Ellen, I don't think I've seen pictures, but I haven't actually like talked to you in person since you've been back in Brighton. What was that trip like?
Yeah, that trip was amazing. I have a completely new respect for Premier League soccer players and what their games look like on a regular basis. We got a chance to go see Brighton Brentford at Brentford, and we were sitting 10 rows off the field. And yeah, it was just watching those guys, especially Ivan Toney from Brentford, and then Joel Veltman from Brighton. They just were going at it all game long. And so now when I watch Premier League on TV and I go, oh, that was a soft foul. There's no such thing as a soft foul in the Premier League.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I didn't fully appreciate just how like every single player is so solid. Like they are all tanks. Like they're just, and just to see the two of them shoulder to shoulder the entire game, is just anyway. So yeah, it was great. And Brighton is a wonderful city and town. And so, if you need another reason to dislike Chelsea, it's for the love of Brighton.
Wow.
So, I'm gonna put it in there if I can. But Brighton is just it's amazing, and yeah, we had a great time. So yeah.
Hey Josh, thanks for sticking up for me when Liz was crapping on Chelsea. You said, "Hey, be mad at Chelsea, but don't be mad at Steve." Thanks.
No problem. Always here.
Still love you, Laura Ellen.
Liz, what's new with you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever.
I'm in Thanksgiving prep mode. So
what does that mean?
So back in the day, we both worked retail, and once upon a time I was doing school full time and doing work. And so going home and like for Thanksgiving was not going to happen if we were going to go home for Christmas. So we started doing a Friendsgiving, and it's, developed and evolved, and people who don't have a Thanksgiving to go to in our group, they come for, starts around 2, they come for lunch and then, stay for the second course. People who do have family show up. Sometimes they bring booze or they bring dessert, and, they're there for whatever, a game in the evening and, friendship time. But because I'm the control freak that I am, I do the full spread, and I have it timed down to when everything starts and the next thing goes in and where everything is in the kitchen. And so I have gotten all the non-perishables already purchased and they're staged. And then Wednesday I will do the perishable purchases in the morning and stage things so that Thursday I can just start around 8 a.m. making a full feast.
I laugh, but like I do the exact same thing at Christmas, so I can't blame you. When you're planning for a bunch of people, you kind of have to do that. So Josh, I saw you like smirking. Do you help Liz at all through this, or you just stay out of her way?
I'm mostly stay out of the way. My tradition has always been the Macy's Day Thanksgiving parade. It's a weird thing that like is silly, stupid, but I still love watching it. So like I'm usually like every commercial break coming in, like if there's any dishes that can be washed, I wash them and then get right out of the way again because I'm just going to be in the way if I'm in the kitchen. So, yeah.
But he cleans every dish as I dirty it. So when I need that mixing cup, our mixing bowl or whatever, it's always clean and everything's always ready. If I need him to grab something off of the stove, he grabs the hot stuff because I don't know, I'm delicate. And so it's really helpful not have to worry about those things.
It's gonna be weird this time though, because we have the World Cup as well during
Mhm.
things. So it's like, okay, like am I gonna watch the Thanksgiving parade? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll probably just have 2 TVs up.
We started watching. Well, so growing up, I always got into the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, but as I've gotten older, I watch it more ironically, and I'm worried that I'm passing that on with my kids because every musical act that comes up, I'm like, "Who is this? What's their name? Who is this clown? Listen to this music," and we just like poke fun at everything about the parade. We have fun poking fun. It does make me slightly concerned now that I think about it. So maybe we'll do less of that this year, but we'll see. Well, I guess welcome everybody. So let's talk a little bit about Hound stuff. So one of the things I want to get out of the way first, if you haven't been listening to Houndsy, go listen to Houndsy. They've done a great job of sort of wrapping up the season. Their most recent episode touched on sort of all of the players that are on options, that are out of contract. They went through and sort of listed who they thought should be back and who shouldn't be back and that whole thing. So a lot of that legwork already done. They've done a great job. We have opinions, but at the same time, I don't want to rehash that entire thing. Instead, what I'd like to do here is I think that the Hounds as an organization is an interesting spot. And so from a fan perspective, I'm just really interested in what is going through everybody's minds at this moment. So obviously the USL Championship season is over. San Antonio has won. Louis did not win, so Louis did not get another star on their crest. But now basically it's all eyes pointing towards 2023. So at this moment, are you in the mindset of you're sort of lamenting or worrying about sort of what happened in 2022? Are you more excited about potentially what could happen in 2023? What exactly does that look like? Really just sort of what's going on in your head. So, Kev, you've sort of been bouncing in and out of this call. So while we have you, hopefully you stick around for the rest of it. I'm going to start with you. Mentally, just where are you with this team, with this organization? What are you thinking about at the moment?
I think right now, I'm generally, like, my focus is on the next year, and it's informed by the previous year's like performance and my mental state of how I saw the previous year turn out. So, I mean, but minorly. So like generally, I'd say like at the end of every season, 80% of it is with fresh eyes and 20% of it is in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, okay, well, like what were the patterns that we saw last year? Who are the players that we expect to keep? What did Bob show us, et cetera, et cetera. And so from that, the kind of baseline look at this team with fresh eyes looking into the new year, it never leaves me excited just because it's just history shows us that like, well, I guess except last year. Last year was a bit of an exception because so many players came back, but it seems like the baseline is generally speaking, a lot of players kind of shift in and shift out, and you have to kind of learn the 6 or 7 or 8 new names in a starting 11 come the first game of the season, and so you kind of have to just sit on your hands and see. And so a lot of it is hard for me to kind of, I don't know, wrap my hands around anything concrete in the off season. Outside of like basic club activities with like training facility, progress and things like that. So, and the 20% that's informed from the previous year, I mean, I think I've kind of mentioned as we wrapped up, I don't know, the playoffs, my mental state is more positive than it was negative going in, because I thought we'd do a lot worse, and they had really good playoff performances, and it still shows there's a lot of belief and bravery in the team and in the squad and the club. So yeah, I mean, I never know what to think. Hopefully the 80% of just kind of questioning starts to get a little bit more predictable with, club presidents hopefully sticking around for more than 4 years, and just more stability throughout the club. But it's still kind of early innings for that kind of stuff looking into 2023.
So you touched on something, and hopefully you guys can. I've sort of been flaking it out as well. I think it's the stream. Are you of the mindset that you'd prefer to see more of our players back next season, or based on the results, do you think you prefer to see sort of a whole new crop and go again? Laura Ellen, I'll start with you.
I was the wrong person to call on for that question because that's not where my train of thought was going. That's interesting.
Well, to give you more time to think about that, maybe,
Right.
and you can think of these as two. Like I'm thinking about them in two categories. One, if all of the names on the back of the jerseys were essentially question marks, like you could say, all right, on average, how much players would you like to return for like kind of a stability thing throughout the club, and then how much of these crop of players would you want to return? Because I think in my mind there's kind of different questions, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny because over the course of the season, as I listened to Mike constantly comparing what Aston Villa is doing with the Riverhounds, it is also impossible for me not to kind of think about, okay, this is how Brighton has kind of set up their structure, and then think about that for the Hounds as well. And what's been interesting about the evolution of Brighton, and something I actually I thought one of the stateside Seagulls, the U.S. Brighton supporters group, brought up a couple weeks ago, is thinking about 5 years ago where we were and kind of what kind of game we were playing. Maybe, I can't exactly remember how long Lily's been here. I know we've had COVID season. Okay, 5 years. Okay, so think about 5.5, 6 years ago. Who was our coach, Dave Brandt, right? So like think about that Riverhounds team, and then think about how far we've come and how much the club has evolved with the training facilities, with the academy, right? And so I think when we have a series of bad games, right, when the season ends in a way that we did not quite expect, I think stepping back and kind of taking that larger, longer view, saying, okay, we are growing. Okay, we're not getting the results we want, and that's kind of what is unfortunate about the playoff structure that exists in the U.S. with MLS and USL, right? That's different than what we're used to in Premier League. But if we think over the past 5.5 years, 5 years, okay, this is the progress we're making, and where do we want to go from there? And so I think perhaps there are some players who, like, someone I think of, right, like maybe Kenny, right? As much, right? We love Kenny. He was still like decent for us this season, right? But maybe it's time for him to retire. So that didn't exactly answer your question, but that's where my mind has been, and that's kind of how I've been thinking about the season, because it was just so incredibly disappointing when we lost, and like I couldn't think about it. Honestly, I couldn't even listen to the entire last episode that Mongols put out, because I just, like, it was too painful and I couldn't listen. I was just like, it had nothing to do with you. I was like, I don't want to think about the Riverhounds. So anyway, but I think with some time, some space, and then thinking about, okay, how far we've come, that's a good reminder to me that I'm like, oh, okay, like we're not doing too bad, right? We now expect to be in the playoffs and do well. Remember 6 years ago when we were like, please, dear Lord, please may all the chips fall so we actually make the playoffs. So I'll stop talking, but those are my thoughts.
No, that's fair. Justin, I'm just gonna sort of go around the horn here as I see people, so I don't forget anybody. But where do you stand on the bring back a whole bunch of players for stability versus they weren't good enough, replace them with the new crop kind of thought?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because Laura Ellen just talked about the last 5 years, and so I actually was doing some research into the last 5 years and trying to figure out like kind of where the Hounds stand over the last 5 years. And actually, it's interesting just diving into it. And I'm the numbers guy, so I'll give the numbers. We're only one of two teams that have made the playoffs for the last 5 years consecutively in the league. We have the third most points over the last 5 years in the league with 276. We have the fourth most regular season goals over that stretch with 248. We have the fewest goals against over that same stretch with 138. And then our goal differential because of that is the fourth highest in the league over those last 5 years, over teams who have been in the league for the last 5 years. And so, like, when you look at those stats, like, kind of the only 3 other teams that are anywhere close to that are Louisville, Tampa, and Phoenix. Phoenix didn't make the playoffs this past year, but Louisville and Tampa have made the playoffs most of the last 5 years. Tampa didn't 5 years ago. So it's just interesting, like, thinking over the last 5 years and all the rotation that we've seen. And we have the same conversation every offseason. Oh my gosh, we lost this player and this player and this player. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How's it going to work? And every year, Bob seems to figure out a way to put the roster together to make the playoffs. And so my thought has been, like, how do you continue to define success for this team when we've been one of 2 of the most consistent teams in the league over the last 5 years? And obviously then it comes down to playoff records, right? Those are the things that then matter, I guess. And so if you look over the stretch, those 3 other teams that I mentioned, Louisville City is 11-3 in the playoffs over that stretch. They've lost 2 championship games and they've won 1. Tampa Bay is 8-3. They've lost a championship game, and then them and Phoenix had to kind of forfeit that championship game because of COVID. Phoenix is 7-3 over that stretch, and again, they lost a championship game and they forfeited. They had to, do that whole thing with COVID. And then Pittsburgh is 2 over that stretch. And so obviously I wonder, like, I don't really care who comes back, but we need to start winning playoff games. Like, that's the thing for me, is like, if it's a whole new crop of players and we go 4-0 in the playoffs and win the championship, great. I don't care that it's a whole new batch of players. If it's the same batch of players and again we go 4-0 or 3-1 even and we lose the championship game, that's okay. It's just amazing to me, looking over the last 5 years, the 4 teams that have been the most consistent, only one of them has won the championship at all. And so I wonder, like, we have this thing of, like, can Bob even bring us a championship? Well, Louisville's the only team that's actually won one. Tampa Bay and Phoenix got their star, but they didn't play a championship game. So I just kind of struggle with the idea of, like, I don't really care how many people come back. I think it's up to Bob to get a playoff win at this point.
That is very fascinating. Really, really good stuff. Steve, where do you stand on all this?
So I'm digesting a lot of what Justin just said, and I'm like, yeah, but he said it at the end, right? I think the consistency, and I've said this, I think, year after year after year, the consistency in the roster is a big reason why I think some of those other teams are progressing farther into the playoffs. I can't know what would have happened, but if we had a Danny Vitiello in goal at the beginning of the season, we probably would have entered the playoffs in a much better position, potentially playing against weaker opposition a lot earlier and having better chances to make a deeper run, because we wouldn't have been losing games or tying games early as we're trying to sort out who's our starting keeper. That took us into 8-10 games into the season before Waite even got a run of games to show something off, right? So I think it's those types of things where when we're looking at Kenny Forbes and 2 other players a year that are getting re-signed or moving beyond a second year, that's the concern for me. That specific players, sure, there are specific players that I think should stay. There are specific players I think should go. But I think the 1-and-1 model is starting to get eclipsed in the league at this point. And when we're having to bring in players and rebuild a culture and rebuild consistency and chemistry through a team every other year, that's where I think there's the opportunity for the team to run a little differently and build a roster that actually continues to have that carryover year after year after year. And it doesn't even need to be the best players on the team, right? Like, I think some of those guys need to stay. I am okay with some of those guys leaving at times, but it's having that core that's more than just 2 or 3 guys 3 years out. That's where I kind of stand on it. That, yeah, I want to see those guys around longer, and I want to see longer contracts for the guys that are doing well, so that we're not rebuilding, because we're looking at an off season where if we're not able to compete on the open market for the guys that are in free agency, that's 9 out of our first 14 guys, right? Our guys that were starting most games. 9 of those guys are up for free agency because we don't have the option year on them. And one of those guys is Kenny Forbes, who's getting up there in age, and maybe he decides to retire. And then we're looking at only a few guys that are locked in starters from this season that are on option year. So it does concern me a bit.
Liz, where do you stand on all of this? Sort of keep the players around and try to build around what we have, or do what we got to do and just get the W?
I mean, any other year, I would have been firmly on the side of you try to keep the players and you try to build some consistency. I think this year is different for a number of reasons, including the way that our roster was built. It was built around what they thought were key purchases, and then we'll figure out our system. But that doesn't mean that you're a person who can handle Bob Lilly. He's a very distinct kind of coach. He's a rough guy to learn under. Not that people don't understand that they're going to learn, and logically you can tell yourself, I know this man will help me progress. But if it's not your learning style and if it beats you down emotionally, it's not healthy for you. You shouldn't be here. It's not good for anybody. You're going to shut down. You're not going to be responsive. It takes away from the culture. Any other year, I think that I would have been, let's try to keep as many people as possible. But this year, I think what I want is for Bob to go back and say, this is the kind of system I want to build, and these are the pieces that fit into that system, because that's what's worked before. Even when we sign players late, is that he's building towards a system, and he wants versatility, and you have to be able to switch in and out of a couple of different roles. But overarching, your first and your second team, they know what kind of football they're playing when they're on the field. I don't think they knew what was going on with some of the subs and where they weren't playing the same kind of game, because they're not the same kind of players, because we didn't build our roster around a system. And I think that was a problem this year. So this year, I don't care if we keep them or we lose them. I just want to see a system be the baseline for how we go forward.
Josh, same question.
It's very similar to that. There are players I feel like that are value players that we have that are great, and I want to see us keep. And some of them aren't on a year option right now, so I want to see some moves to keep certain players. But overall, there's not as much of a cohesion this year that I feel like we've had in previous years, where it felt like it all came together near the end, and we were firing all cylinders. And then we have to lose all those, connective tissue going into the off season and rebuild it. So there's definitely not that cohesion this year. So yeah, there's a lot of players that might be good players, but don't fit. And it's okay if we lose them, if that means we're building something more cohesive, which, yeah, I'm just tired of Moneyball. I don't want to feel like we're going to the bargain bin and trying to get the best value player for our money, being like, oh yeah, this one, the return on investment's this much for this player. Like, just get good players. We don't have to play this game. I don't think we have to play this game. I feel like we're in a pretty good financial situation. We're growing. We keep on growing. We have great facilities. We should be able to get good players and not have to play that game.
But at the same time, I don't want to see let's buy a really expensive player like we did this year, who didn't produce for whatever reasons. And I think there were probably at least 5. I don't know what they all are, but I think there were probably at least 5. That's not one thing why that didn't work. So I don't want to see us play that kind of Moneyball either. We're like, well, let's buy someone flashy and see what happens around that, because that also doesn't work.
No, but let's keep the players that have been performing well instead of letting them walk, like a Russ Cicerone. Don't want to see him leave like we saw Nico Brett leave, and then we're starting fresh in that position, that kind of thing.
Agreed.
Is there a reason why we're not saying Dane Kelly's name?
We're trying to be respectful, not put anyone under the bus here, but yeah, Dane Kelly didn't work out, and that was a flashy signing. And
I mean, he didn't get on the bus a lot, so
well, yeah. That bothers me a lot. We're never probably going to know the full story about what happened there, but it's a situation where it's like, wow, we spent all that money on this player, and it was a big get, and just did not utilize and did not perform.
I have a theory on that, and I want to bring it back up because I'm very interested in your guys' thoughts on this. But Kev, I wanted to circle it all the way back to you. Now that this question is sort of morphed and transformed and everything else, do you have any additional thoughts as it relates to keep the players and sort of try to build a system around them versus just scrap it and do whatever we need to win?
Yeah, after everything that Justin said, just I don't care. Because to me, that means we're great and just keep giving Bob the control of the bus. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, I that was the big thing I took away from that. I was surprised to hear like those numbers. I expected worse, but it was contextualized by the rest of by everyone else's conversation of all right, but show me what you do in the playoffs, and I would have thought that this group of players, a lot of the starting 11 were the same starting 11 that didn't get to play, in the first round of the playoffs last year because of COVID, and would have thought there would have been some. And well, I don't know. I mean, we weren't. I wouldn't say we were particularly young. I wouldn't say we were like old in every position, but we weren't particularly young either. So there's experience, and arguably we did well in the playoffs. But yeah, there's nothing else to add. That was really good conversation.
Yeah. No, sorry, I was trying to take myself off mic or mute. Jeez, Louise, I'm all over the place tonight. Yeah, so I think what's interesting to me, I think there's a couple of different things that I sort of take away from everything that was said. I think everything that was said was extremely valid. I think one, there is reality, and then two, there is perception. And when the perception doesn't match up with the reality, then you need to ask yourself why. So yeah, we might be, one of the top 4 teams over the past 5 years, but that doesn't mean that there aren't points of the season where everyone's like, well, this is crummy. Like no one wants to come on and talk about this team because it's miserable. So it's kind of like not the like, what have you done for me lately kind of thing, because that's very harsh. But I do think that doesn't mean that you can't ignore the perception, or you should ignore the perception of how the team is actually performing, how you actually feel about them right now. Because ultimately what the team is selling is an experience. Like they've sort of made that very clear. And so if the experience is like, which I'm not saying that it 100% is, there were points this season where it definitely felt that way. But that's one piece of it. The other thing is, and this is where, Justin, your stats really get interesting because it totally just messes with my head. But listening to Hounsley, they were sort of talking about which forwards we want back this year. And they sort of talked about Dikwa and they talked about Ayang. And what's interesting is that I think when Dikwa was re-signed heading into this season, a lot of people were like, huh? Like what? He was sort of our backup. Like what? And I have this weird theory, and I want to dig into the stats more, but I get this feeling that, and this is totally just a shot in the dark, but I'm curious to see if you guys agree with this or not. I feel like Bob isn't good at structuring an offense. I think that we've seen year in and year out, he can bring in brand new defenders, he can bring in a brand new keeper and make them look great, and they perform great. Statistically, they're sort of in the top 5 or 6 of all the teams every single season. But at least when it comes to forwards, we go out and we sign someone like Dane Kelly on the hopes that Dane Kelly is going to be the difference maker, and it's a total flop. We bring back Dikwa, which I would almost argue, when you look at the stats, Dikwa is ranked 21 in across the league in terms of goals scored. So this isn't like he's this top goal scorer. I think he's a fantastic player, but like he's not a pure Nico Brett. He's not, one of these out and out guys that's going to get you a goal every other game or anything like that. We've even had conversations about, when Russ goes in and he's one-on-one with a keeper, it's almost a sure bet to score. When Dikwa does the same, you're kind of on the edge of your seat because you're not sure it's actually going to happen. And this isn't a dig about Dikwa, but this is just more or less saying that sometimes when you get to the offense, it's just kind of like throw something out there and see if it works. We signed Robbie Mertz and we were all like, this is it. This is going to be the savior, largely because like we knew of Mertz from before, but like could we have brought in somebody else that was on the same level of Robbie Mertz? And I don't know if we would have been as equally as excited just because Robbie was here before. So I'm sort of like talking myself around in circles to basically say, I think Bob is real. For years, we've said, Bob isn't a defensive coach. And I agree that he is more of an all-around coach. I'm just starting to get the sense that when it comes to offense, it's much more of a like throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Whereas defense and keeper, it is very much more of like, this is exactly what I want, and these are the results I'm going to get. Even with guys that, we look at and we sort of scoff at, by the end of the year, they're studs.
I actually don't think, I don't know. I mean, I think sticking with Dane Kelly all season is throwing it at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Mm-hmm.
I think starting Dikwa is trying to control how we attack.
I think that there was more to the Dane Kelly thing, though, because for half the season, he was still our top-ranked goal scorer for playing 6 games or whatever it was. So, like, statistically, he was doing great. So there's something else that was going on there.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean. I think symbolically, he's the stick him up front and he'll make magic happen. Or I don't know. So I guess like him not staying with Kelly symbolically to me represents something else. And I understand that there could have been a lot of different reasons why Kelly doesn't start. But to me, Dikwa just always felt like he was doing exactly what Bob wanted him to do. And I don't know.
Your thought there, Mike, is interesting. I think like one of the things that I noticed towards the end of the season as I was doing preview videos and trying to think through things to tip out, and this is a thought that never actually came to fruition, but towards the end of the season, I looked at one of the things a stat that I noticed was Kenny Forbes had like 146 crosses. Like I think that was somewhere around the number. The next closest player on the team had like 45. And so my struggle is you say he doesn't know how to struggle in offense. He has one offensive option. Kick the ball out wide to Kenny, have Kenny put it in the box. And that's the offense that the Hounds have at this point. And so that's been my issue for the last couple of years is just I think
quick interjection on that point. Presumably they weren't counting corners as crosses because that's the only way I could think about it.
I don't think so. Like I don't know. But
okay.
As I watched the next couple of games after I saw that stat, I saw it happening where it would be like Kenny would drift out wide. They would get the ball out to Kenny. He would try to beat a defender on the dribble and get it into the box. That was 90% of our offense right there. And I don't know that that's the most successful way to play soccer in this league. I think 5 years ago, that was the most successful way to play soccer in the league. Is you get a big striker who can out-jump everybody, and you throw a bunch of crosses in. And that's why 5 years ago, guys like Asante and Dos Santos and those guys were heads and tails above the rest of the league in goal scored. I think now you're seeing those shifty number 10s, the smaller strikers, the guys who have speed, the guys who can counter and I think that's what made the Hounds so successful toward the end of last year was when Dikwa and Cicerone and these guys would get on the counter, all of a sudden you would see goal after goal after goal in the net. And that just never happened this year. It was all slow. And then finally we'd get it out to Kenny and Kenny would put it in the box. And I just struggle. Yeah, I struggle with the way our offense is structured because I think it's very single player focused. And that's where I'm wondering, can Danny Rivera not hit a cross? Can Nathan Dos Santos not hit a cross? Can none of those guys hit a cross? So a ball's coming in from the other side or a ball's coming in from a different player. Is it all just Kenny? Is that the only hope we have of scoring goals?
Yeah.
I hope not, because I don't think he's going to be here much longer. So it's very concerning, and kind of going along with what Mike you were originally saying with like sometimes the perception doesn't match the reality. I feel like the issue with the Hounds have been you kind of have different extremes that you can go towards for entertainment for this team, for any team really. And like one would be just fun to watch. And I don't know the Hounds are fun to watch, and they haven't been. And the other one is results. Like if you're getting results, then that's fun. So, and like getting the same result every single playoff is not fun. So like they're not fun to watch sometimes. They're kind of just, basics defensive team, but they're also not winning everything. So it's you kind of gotten meh on both.
That's kind of the struggle, right? I think if we did nothing but win, then it's sort of like all sins are forgiven. You want to scrap the whole team and start over every year? Great. You want to play ugly soccer? Great. As long as we know that we're running the table and we're winning everything, super. But as soon as that goes out the window, then we as fans have the right to just sort of question what it is that's happening. And I think we touched on this a little bit on the last episode, which feels like it was ages ago. But this whole idea that as long as we're still in this system of constantly swapping out players every single year, then we are beholden on basically Lily, where like if we just have to trust that whatever Lily says is going to work, and there isn't an actual like club system. We don't have sort of like a front office director of operations kind of situation where it's like, you look at teams like Louisville or Tampa that are sort of swapping coaches and still having success. If Lily goes, we're hosed. Like that's kind of where we're at. And the more often that we keep just throwing players away every 2 years and starting over, that's never going to change. And that's not me saying that we should get rid of Lily. That's not me saying that his system isn't working. It's just that, Josh, to your point, if we're not running the table, then there are going to be things that we're going to have to start questioning. And so, especially in a situation like this where you start to develop some relationship with guys and all of a sudden you're seeing that they're leaving, maybe it's because they're not getting along with Bob, maybe it's for other reasons, and the team isn't, making it past the first or second round of the playoffs, then you're going to start questioning why. And so that's sort of where we're at.
That's another problem I have with the season is that I don't think that Lily got to be his coaching self, because Lily knows that he needs to entertain, and part of entertaining is you need to score goals. So he's slowly become more offensive, and we've all seen that. In the beginning of this year, we're like, we're going to score a bazillion goals. Not naming names, someone said we would never lose. They were wrong. But we scored so many goals, right? And even at that time, I think that you guys said our defense doesn't look great. And Lily's always been a defensive coach, but if we're going to score 4 goals, it doesn't matter. We're going to handle it. Lily, as a defensive coach, which is perfectly fine and acceptable, went, I'm going to fix my defense, which means he abandons his offense. And you can't just live status quo on your offense. And with the way that we developed the team this year, people aren't interchangeable. So we had one crosser. I think part of the reason we were so excited Mertz came back is because he can move into 2 or 3 positions and fill where we see weaknesses on the other team so that we can adapt to teams, which is something we've always been really good at and something that's very exciting to watch because our team is so diverse and you never know exactly what you're going to see on the field. We didn't get that this year. So let Lily be a defensive coach and someone force him to get offensive help. He needs someone who knows how to develop our strikers and our, forward mids. He needs another person and he can keep 96% of the control, but 4% he needs to say, okay, while I'm fixing the back line, while I'm making sure that they're meeting my defensive standards, you go talk to them about how to do the crosses, how to receive those, how to watch out for each other, how to be interchangeable so that we can meet the team that comes out on the field, our opponent. I think that was another problem with this year.
Yeah, I want to give somebody else a chance to talk, but I do think that talking about that specifically, I feel like he sort of got lucky with Dikwa in that I think the hopes were on Dan Kelly, and the fact that Dikwa turned out as well as he did was we all sort of expected him to be number 2 or number 3 on the offensive depth chart coming into the season. That just didn't happen. Justin, I see you feverishly typing away at something, and I feel like you have a whole bunch of stats that's just going to refute everything we just said.
No, I'm not trying to refute anything. I just wanted to.
Whatever. I wouldn't believe you anyways.
Whatever.
Shots fired.
I just wanted to. While you were talking about that, I just wanted to look something up, and I was just thinking about something. So, Bob's 2015 Rochester Rhinos team that won the championship, they scored 39 goals in the season and gave up 15 goals in the season. In 2019, when we won the East, we scored 58 goals and gave up 30, and we thought we were really good defensively that year. And so,
Yeah, but the games played are way different.
That's what I was going to ask too.
Six more games played in the season, and so it's a different league. You have to score goals. Like you have to score goals.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm just. I agree. I mean, I think we need to go out and figure out the offensive side of the field. And if Bob's not your offensive coach, then you've got to figure out how to move forward in that. Something you said, Mike, too, like spurred another thought in my head of, you said like front office and like getting on the same page with the front office and trying to figure out. That actually is what excites me about Jeff Garner is I think like that's his vision is he wants the club to be united. And I heard him say kind of somewhere in the season, like there's not enough Riverhounds branding at the Montour complex. Well, if there should be. Like that's our training facility. That's our academy facility. There should be Riverhounds branding out there. And so, and he like, that was one of the things he was like, as soon as he came in, he noticed that and he's like, I got to go fix that. And so I think it's just that's what Louisville has developed over the course of 10 years is now they're seeing some of their academy players coming into the first team, starting for the first team, signing for European clubs, blah, 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 blah. So how we have not been working on our academy in the same way that Louisville has. So can we continue to work on our academy the same way that Louisville has? And can we continue to move players who have known Bob from the time they're 12 years old till now, and then they can play for him. So just two thoughts that I was just like, as you guys were talking, it was just spurring thoughts in my head.
My one comment on the academy is I totally agree 100%. But I think that where you have organizations that are successful in moving players from the academy up to the pro system is when the style of play at the academy matches what's being played at the pro system. And if we don't have a style of play at the pro level because we're constantly changing it based on our personnel, then you're less likely to just have players step in and make a difference. Now that could be a very broad, you look at teams like Barcelona or you look at some of the teams in the EPL where you see a little bit of success doing it. It's because of that. That doesn't mean that's the only way that it has to happen. But no, I fully agree that sort of putting more stock in the academy and you know what, Louisville had 2 19-year-olds that were playing at the end of the game against us in the playoffs. So like, yeah, that's absolutely where we want to be. But that's also not necessarily going to fix whatever our offensive woes are. So yeah. Steve, I know you had a couple of different points that you want to talk about on this show, and I realize we're already like 45 minutes in. So
I was throwing out topics so we would have to talk about. Do I want to talk about those things? No. What I do want to emphasize in the previous conversation is the league is different. And I'm trying to remember back. I don't remember when it was, but I remember distinctly, Mike, at one point, you talking about crazy fun times. And we were asking the question as a group, like, are we beyond the 1-0 Lily special? And are we okay with crazy fun times? And then what Liz was talking about, right? Like, we've got to be able to score goals. We've got to be entertaining. And it just makes me wonder if Bob has adapted to the league long term, right? He's still getting results now, obviously, because we're still getting into the playoffs, though maybe not as well as we'd like anymore. But at what point, do we start seeing the team take that next step? And that's being it, because I think the three of us talked about it a couple of weeks ago, right? Like, I was not convinced when we were up 2-0 at 70 minutes that the game was locked down. I
Yeah.
wanted a third goal, right? So I'm less convinced when the game is 1-0, and I don't care how good of a defensive coach Bob Lilly can be. The league isn't that same league. And so that's why when I talk about building a roster for the future, that's why when I talk about who we've got and what positions long term, those things are important because they indicate that we're thinking beyond just what has worked in the past and how do we just recreate that magic to just stay where we are. Because I don't think it's that Bob Lilly can't get it done, but the rest of the league is getting better, and are the Hounds getting better on a year-to-year basis? And I'm just not convinced that we are, especially when two of the most exciting players that we've seen, right? Like the players I've been most excited to see do some different things are loanies from MLS clubs the past 2 seasons that have come in and lit things up, right? Like those young guys that Justin was talking about at Louisville. It's like, man, these guys are a joy to watch. They're young, they're talented, they got a lot of energy, they're willing to take the risks, and they're willing to do things that I think don't necessarily fit the methodical create the best chance you can that Bob Lilly has tried to implement with the offense. They're taking risks, they're making risky passes, but they're streaking forward and making those runs and doing a lot of the little passing instead of the pass back to reset the offense, right? They're just trying to force something to happen. And we saw that with Kizza, that happened a couple times, especially the one goal against Birmingham in the playoffs, right? Like, I mean, he made that goal happen out of nothing. And that's something that I don't see on a day-to-day basis with the Hounds and Bob Lilly's system, whatever that is. Whether it is a system or not, I don't know anymore. Liz is maybe convincing me it's not.
I think there is a system. I just think that he's trying to do it all, and with such a firm idea of what should happen over the entire field, that doesn't mean that you can train everybody on the entire field anymore. Like you've said, like this league has developed, this league has changed. They're going to challenge you in different pieces. So you've got to be prepared on all of those pieces. You've got to have creative forwards who aren't just waiting from a pass from one man. You've got to have, a defensive line that can stand up to the pressure and that can, push forward when they need to, but be a consistent support as opposed to letting. I mean, we had a lot of breakthroughs that, we let through and we didn't know what to do with that. And I don't feel like the communication was as good for whatever reason this year. And is it because I think part of it's because Bob Lilly is pulled in too many directions to try and keep up with the league, and he just can't do it all on his own anymore. He needs that support if he's going to see his vision on the field actually happen. And I think it's fine for him I think that he knows what he wants to see on the field. And I think that I'm behind what he wants to see on the field. I just don't think that he can bring it about himself.
But I mean, at the same, like, if we extend a season to last 5 years since Lilly's been here, we're second or third best team in the league. So, like, I guess to contextualize all of that, like, I don't necessarily disagree with that entire conversation, but just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of the numbers that Justin put out at the beginning of
Right.
like
this is why we can't say Lilly out, because obviously there are good things, but we're stuck, as Laurella pointed out, with a totally different playoff system. And if we want to produce in that playoff system, we have to add something to it. This isn't just who's, winning the East, who's winning points, like who's ending up at the top. We've got to think about the playoffs as well. And that's where things seem to fall apart a little bit. So we need to bring in something else.
And this was our second worst finish in the regular season under Lilly. I think his first year we were in the same spot. Is that correct?
I think that's.
I think this was our worst, actually. I think we
was
were
our worst. Okay.
Fourth.
Yeah.
I think we were fourth his first season.
Okay. Yeah. That doesn't feel good. So I'm not convinced of it, Kevin. I feel like I guess man, this was fun in the past. I'm not having fun tonight.
I don't know. I'm still having fun.
I think my whole thing with it is it's starting to feel very Spurs-esque. Like, you're going to be in the top 4 every year, going to make Champions League, but you're never going to win the Premier League and you're never going to win the Champions League. And so that's what it's just feeling like to me, as far as that I would rather be in a spot like Chelsea where you are like,
Russian oligarchs and yachts getting seized.
Hey, we've got
No.
American investment capital now, baby.
but in the sense that you might finish 7th one year, but that same year you win the Champions League because you were there from the previous season. So like, that's my thing of like, I'd rather almost have a dip somewhere for us to win somewhere else. Like, cool, let's finish in 5th or 4th and get the home playoff game, but then let's run through the playoffs, or like whatever it is. I don't care. But like, I'd almost rather just have a dip at some point that sees like we're going somewhere, rather than just like, okay, we're gonna get to the playoffs, we're gonna lose in the first 2 rounds. Like,
Yeah.
we got to get beyond that at some point.
We always do have a dip. It's called the U.S. Open Cup. It's fine. We never perform there.
Oh,
I mean,
it
right,
made me
but
so
like-
sad.
I mean, but to Justin's point, would you rather not make the playoffs and win the Open Cup?
I mean,
No.
winning the Open Cup, yeah, I think that would be amazing.
Maybe.
I'll take it.
I would take that deal. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Right?
maybe that's the thing.
I mean, and that's
Justin's
sort
gonna
of the
fight us
season.
all.
That's sort of the season that Sacramento had, right? Like,
Yeah.
they were terrible most of the season, got into the playoffs, but they were terrible most of the season. But they ran all the way to the Open Cup final. So, like, could the Hounds do that one year? Would that be more exciting than, like, I don't know, but it would
I
just.
think that it shows.
Hold on,
growth.
real quick,
And
real
we're
quick.
all asking for that. We see your stats and we're happy, but like
Yeah.
we want something different. So
Hold
yeah.
on, just quick show of hands, and I know this is an audio format, so this is terrible. But if you had the option to swap with Sacramento this year, if you would not, let's just say we would not make the playoffs this year, but we would make it to the U.S. Open Cup final, would you take that over the season that the Hounds had this year? Show of hands if you would take that.
150%.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
1,
sure.
2, 3, 4, 5.
I
Okay,
think
so
so. I want to
so-
win the Open Cup. Can I win the Open Cup?
That's my thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Getting to the final of the Open Cup is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We get to the
I
final
don't
and
care.
lose. No, I want the playoffs, please.
I
I mean,
don't know.
look,
We've had that.
the publicity and the good feels that came out of Sacramento, even though they made it to the finals, like that's
Everybody
worth
was a
something.
Sacramento fan on that night, right?
Exactly.
Like the whole of USL fandom was rooting for Sacramento. How cool would
Listen.
that be as a Hounds fan?
And I think too, that
lose. I'm
the
kidding.
team talks about they want to produce an experience, right? They want to get people going to the stadium. They want to get people excited about the team. I think there's more than one way to do that. You don't have to win the USL championship every single season to do that, but you need to figure out some way to get more eyeballs on the team to get people invested so that they're
but
buying
fine,
jerseys
but
and they're going to games.
But flip the question, Mike. Would you rather be boring as hell and win the league? Like, yeah, I'll take that.
I don't.
But that wasn't.
I
It aligns with your personality, Kevin.
It's part of.
Ouch.
There's both, right?
Burn.
There's both, right? There's 2 ways to get people in the seats, and I think Sacramento and Louisville are 2 of the like sides of the same coin. Louisville is going to get to the championship game every year, even though they only won 1 in the last 5 years. They've been there 3 times and won 1. Sacramento has had some and they still both put 12,000 people in their stadiums every game. So that's what I'm like. I would rather see 12,000 people at Highmark, even though we can't fit that, versus
We'll
Like-
make it work. We'll make.
I
We have
would
some
not
standing
want to
space.
see
We will make it work.
12,000 people in Highmark.
nobody would ever get food if we had 12,000 people in that
It's all right, we
stadium.
don't do
but-
it
Food
anyways.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay.
No, I agree with Justin as well, because I mean, I also think about like the negative conversation that we have about, oh my gosh, freaking Louisville every year, right? Like, I'll take that about the Hounds too. If we're the team that's knocking a team out every year and we're advancing to be in that position to give ourselves a chance to get the championship, I'll take both sides of it. I want something more than just the predictability of we're going to get into the playoffs. And when we face a team that's above us in the table, probably Louisville, we're not going to advance.
This all, I mean, not to keep referencing Premier League stuff, but this all feels like conversations I heard Arsenal fans have when they had Arsene Wenger at the helm, where they were like, this is just boring. I'm tired of making top 4 for 20 years. And I think with Arteta coming in, all of them feel vindicated now. But I think that's a roll of a dice where it could equally, if not more likely, go the other way too, where you make a change and you're languishing at the bottom half of the table for
You
a
could
while.
get Arteta or you can get a Steven Gerrard. Like,
Well, you weren't really doing. I mean, you weren't doing what. But anyway, so that's the kind of point of like, are we collectively as a fan base willing to potentially risk uncertainty and take a big step back for a couple years and stay there for a bit, or while also risking a possibility of taking a big step forward? I don't know.
I think
Are you saying Lily? Are you asking about a Lily out situation?
No, I guess in the context of the conversation of this is all getting a little bit boring kind of thing of like,
Sure.
give me something. To me, metaphorically, that gets attached to Lily. Like if Lily's here, we get that. I don't know if that, I'm not necessarily saying
see.
that's, but in my mind, that's the connection. So in order to remove that, you remove Lily, and then the void that gets filled in with is an uncertainty that
So,
it could take. us
I'm
back.
not in for that uncertainty. Hard no.
Yeah.
Because I was the one that said that, I agree to a sense, but I think that's why I've advocated for something else with the organization of a director of football or restructuring how we do the contracts, right? It's not just Lily or not in my mind. It's something has to change. But when it's just, I feel like I start to get to attach to the players. I start to get to know the players and then they're gone, right? Like it's that without the progression in the playoffs, without knowing if we're going to re-sign some of our best players this year. That's where it is for me. And it's just, I want more. I want something different.
Kev, I think my answer to your question from my perspective is we'll find out in 2023. I think that we've had 4 or 5 years of Lily. If we get yet another year of the same thing where we're seeing completely scrambled roster, we're seeing a bunch of games where we're throwing stuff away, or there's no clear, I don't even say no clear game plan offensively, but it's more of the just like hopes and prayers, chuck the ball up and maybe something will happen. And then we get to the playoffs and we're out in the first or second round. Then I'm going to say, yes, I'm willing to gamble on something new, even if that means we don't make the playoffs, because it's something new. We're not moving forward.
But let me tweak your scenario. I mean, as someone pointed out, yes, this is the worst year that Lily's had as far as like finishing in the table. So let's say likely we don't finish the same position in the table next year. Let's say we finish second and we go out second round of the playoffs and we play some good football. We create some good memories. We have some good games. We finish second and we go out in the second round of the playoffs. Where are you there? Because to me, that feels like essentially like par for the course since Lily's been here.
All right, but to make it completely fair, where did we end up in the Open Cup? And do we have because I think that's part of the equation for us,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
And did we have the kind of for me this season, I knew the players' names and eventually I could find them on the field because it takes me a while because I'm not good at that thing. But I didn't feel attached to anyone, and I definitely felt like there was a ton of underperformance and that nothing was meshing. So am I watching another season where I'm like, I don't know, I'm not really attached to these players. For the first time ever watching this team, I was like, I know who they are, but I don't feel attached because I don't know what's happening.
It is.
I think that's a question too.
I think it's really important. Yeah,
I'd love to do a show. Maybe we'll do a show in this offseason that sort of explores this more. But I think there's this question of what makes people a Hounds fan or what brings people to Highmark Stadium. And I think that we've touched on sort of what brings people to Highmark Stadium before, but I think there's a few things that might make people a Hounds fan. And it could be, you're just sort of diehard for the organization. So it doesn't matter what players are going to be here. You're always going to support this team regardless of how good or bad or whatever they are. And there's a small subset of people that are going to fall into that category. You have sort of the casual fans that are going to show up whenever the team's winning because they see that it's in the news. And so they just want to come out and see what all the fuss is about. You're going to have the people that they develop a sort of a personal relationship or sort of an emotional attachment with some of the players. And so they're going to come out for that reason. And once those players are gone, then you start to question, how dedicated you are to the team. But there's a number of these different scenarios that I think would be really interesting. And this is why I keep coming back in my mind to like documentary, docuseries, things like that, because I think to a certain extent, they hone in on a number of those things.
You want an
and
Amazon Prime special for the Hounds?
I'm
Is
just
that what
saying-
you want?
Are you proposing a documentary? Are you going to direct this?
it would be awesome. But like, I think that
Do you want
This-
Ryan Reynolds to buy the Hounds, Mike? Is that what you want?
we've already had this conversation. Ryan Reynolds would never buy the Hounds because there's no chance of pro rel, and so there's no story there. But that was a little too serious of a response. Anyway, that was just me saying I'd love to sort of revisit this at some other point. We're like running at, we're almost at an hour, but I wanna ask all of you, because we're all here, what is one thing you are hoping to see this off season? And it could be anything from something related to off the field, on the field, front office related, academy related, not even related to the Hounds. Just what is one thing you are hoping to see this off season? Laura Ellen, you were looking extremely pensive with your like thinking, man, head on your fist. So I'll start with you. What is one thing you're hoping to see this off season?
I had an initial thought, and then I realized that it wouldn't ever happen. So I was trying to think practically. I think having a more cohesive, this is our, right, it's like the cradle to grave thing, right? Like this is our academy, and this is how our academy supports the community and trains great footballers and connects them to opportunities, whether that be through playing at the collegiate level, or I suppose, just for the men, connecting them to playing for the first team, right? Like, I think I'd really like to see cohesiveness across all of that, or more of that. And I would love to see more community engagement, and I think that's been happening over the last couple of years. I know COVID has made that a bit more challenging, and I'm not on the social medias, and so I don't really see all the things, but I think that's just more of a, we are a community club, right? And this is how we are supporting not only our first team, but the development of the game, and engagement with our community. I think that's what I'd like to see.
Okay. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty similar kind of vague thought of like, what is the continuity plan at the club to continue to sustain success? And so I don't know that I really have anything specifically to this offseason of like, I definitely want to see this before the end of, before the first ball gets kicked in 2023. I don't know that it's that. I think one of the most interesting storylines to me at the club right now is Dan Visser. And I don't know what the plan is with him. I know that there has been talk that he has been prepped for coaching interviews and all that kind of stuff, but he's been around for 6 years now. And so I just wonder, when you start in, and you can look around the academy and see guys like Rob Vincent, Kevin Kerr, Jason Cutney, who have been around a long time. And so what's the plan? How are those guys moving in the organization? Are they continually moving up? Are they continually developing? And like, what's the thought process behind those guys going forward? So I don't know that I have anything specific to this offseason. I'd love to see some good signings and things like that. Players who we actually know their name ahead of time. I'd love to see some of our guys back, but I don't have anything real specific to this offseason.
That's fair. Steve?
So I think finding a way to re-sign the players that have been here to contracts, and I'll qualify that as well. Some of those contracts being things that are more than a 1-and-1, right? Whether that's a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract, or bringing in a player and offering them a 1-year contract with a 2-year option or something like that, right? Something that is just different and shows that there's a more long-term player retention mindset, as opposed to we're just going to see what happens. And if we lose our best players in 2 years because they get better offers elsewhere, we'll start again.
Fair. Liz?
I guess I want to see them use the new training facility. Like, preseason starts so early now. We'll have Christmas and then people could start showing up at literally any moment after that to start doing preseason stuff. So I want to see them start using the facility to get the guys just having fun to start off with, where, you have the space and you have the fields and you have some of the older academy kids and testing yourself and testing ideas and watching them build relationships that aren't completely dependent on, we need to know who at least 11 or 14 of our guys are so that we can start scrimmaging. I want to see a little bit more of that and the relationships they can build.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, it's not really play related. I think it's more just a maturity level, kind of like a professionalism boost as far as the marketing in the front office, and like just feeling like we leveled up, because I feel like we're on that cusp right now. And it would be great to actually see like a cohesive marketing strategy where you're actually seeing packages put together for player signings, not just some, random press release that comes out to 5 people who are signed up to the emails, and it kind of just getting trickled out through like Pittsburgh Soccer Now and, Twitter. Like I want to actually feel like there's a little bit more just pomp and circumstance to these signings, to these announcements, to just everything, and it feel cohesive with a brand identity and that kind of stuff. Like, just I wanted to feel more mature than what we have.
Are we gonna have Twitter by the
sorry. I meant Mastodon or Hive or Pose. I don't know what's going to happen, but just something.
I mean, it's got to still be copy and paste, or else we lose Pittsburgh Soccer Now, right?
Yeah. Kev?
In a lot of ways, just what Josh said, but just in different words. Just consistency in the kind of backroom staff, and just ensuring that Bob has abundant off the field resources made available to him. I'm not necessarily interested in him making sure he has the biggest war chest in USL history to sign players, but making sure that, he has all the help he needs.
I think I'll sort of close it out here. I think that what I am most hoping for this offseason is just for the team to surprise me in some way. Do something that's going to surprise me. So either it's
Fire Bob. Is that going to surprise you?
No. I mean, yes, that would, but that's not what I'm getting
Team
at.
singing Telegram.
What I'm getting at is, do something that is going to drag me out of this malaise of, the past few seasons, where it's either
I don't think the Hounds are going to do that, Mike. I think that's a broader societal thing that's been happening
but
for years.
Look, we mentioned a number of things on here that could be interesting, right? You start to incorporate Dan Visser more. It could be something related to the stadium where they announce, actual stadium expansion. It could be, okay, we're going to bring in some new players that show signs of a whole new approach to how we're going to do this thing. Like something that I'm going to look at. I'm not just going to be like, oh, this is plug and play new players. Same thing
the
as
training
last year.
facility not do that for you?
No, the training facility does, but to me, we knew that's been coming. It was delayed in opening. Now I'm not knocking it. I think it's amazing. We talked about it last time we got together. I think it's a fantastic facility, but it's just like surprise me.
Surprising. Yeah, it's not
It's
surprising.
not surprising. Like surprise me in some way. And it could be, what you guys said about how they release information about players. Great. It could be some new TV deal. It could be anything really. It could be a new kit sponsor. I don't know, whatever. But like something that's showing me that this isn't just going to be the same old again in 2023. And so we're going to be back here 2 games after the playoffs are over and we've been knocked out by Louisville again. And we're going, well, now what, guys? So just hope is what I want. And right now I'm in need of it. So
If anyone at the Rubber Hounds organization would like Mike's address, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give
They
it to
know-
you and you can go visit him.
They
And-
know how to find me. No
Mike,
worries.
what would
Beer
you
people
do?
found you.
What, Mike, what would you do if like Bob Lilly showed up at your door and is like, all right, let's have a conversation.
Listen, no joke. Well, first of all, I'd be like, what? But I have nothing against Bob personally. Like, we've talked to him a number of times. I think Bob is a great guy. Do I agree with some of his coaching stuff? Not always, but that's part of what we do here. Like, we are not the Hounds front office. We're not going to sit here and applaud every single decision that's made. We're like fans, and if we just said that we love every single thing that we do, then we're not being true to what the fans are actually thinking. So sure, I joked about how it would be great to like follow one of the players around as they go through a day at the new training facility. It'd be great to like sit down and have a beer with Bob and film that, but you'd be there for 4 days. And so like, it would be like great content, you'd have to just like pull out little nuggets here and there.
So we're back to the documentary that you're going to
That's right. We're back to
Got it.
one interview that would have to be like an 8-episode docuseries.
Not a problem.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. No, listen, I think closing thought, I'm still a massive fan of this club. It's our local team. I think we all are. Nobody's saying that they aren't. I think we're all sort of excited to see what happens next. The whole title of this episode was sort of looking back and looking forward. I think we're in this weird in-between spot where we're trying to figure out, like, what is this team moving forward? It might be exactly the same thing as it was last year. It might be something different, but we don't know. And we won't really know until we start signing players and we start getting press releases. And that typically doesn't happen until December-ish. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. And I'm sure there's going to be other topics that we'll get together and discuss. I think, Laura Ellen, maybe it was you that had there's a podcast from NPR that you want to talk about. There's EPL that we could talk about. So I think we're going to start scheduling some sort of in-between episodes where we can talk about Premier League. And why are you giving me that look? What is
I
that
didn't
look
sign
like?
up for additional things. I signed up for this thing. I will say, because the World Cup is happening right now, there is a podcast on NPR called The Last Cup, and it gives a lot of context to Messi and his relationship with Argentina and what it may be like for him experiencing this last World Cup. So the episodes are really short. And it's in English and Spanish. So I would encourage. I've really, really been enjoying it. And as someone who's been to Argentina twice, who has followed Messi for a very long time, I'm learning a lot. So anyway, that's my shameless plug for that.
Awesome.
Quick last question. What is the youngest Rhinos player that Bob coached, and should we sign him next season?
I
Yes.
think we're out. I think there's no
Answer is
more.
yes.
Are we done?
I think so.
All right. Well, there goes my bright idea.
There's a ball boy, surely. That was like-
Surely.
Surely. Somebody
gosh.
save us.
The fact that
We haven't had a Riverhound Rhino come back yet, have we? Like leave and come back?
Todd Pratzner.
Does Mertz
No.
count?
We
No.
Mertz
Does
count?
that count?
Yeah, I'm saying.
No, because Mertz
need
wasn't
Pratzner.
a Rhino.
Todd
Yeah.
Pratzner.
Yeah,
We
Todd
need
Pratzner,
How many
you're right.
times- Todd Pratzner.
Yeah,
We need
yeah.
Pratzner.
Is he still
Good,
playing?
good call, Justin. Man, I forgot about that dude.
Is he retired?
I don't know where Todd Pratzner is. I
Why not?
If
He
Todd
answered the
Pratzner
question
showed up at
objectively.
the door, yeah.
He's right.
An hour
What
and
would you
15
do?
minutes in, and you've ruined the show.
Oh,
I think Todd Pratzner is as good a place as any to end this one. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Like I said, I'm looking forward to we said we got to do some like crazy, not even crazy, just like different mixes of people this off season, just to sort of get some different thoughts and different topics and things. So look forward to that. We might just literally have like a hat that I'll just like randomly draw names out of, and I'll be like, oh, it's you three this week. Let's go. And so
Still works great with scheduling. Can't wait.
yeah, I know, right? But yeah, otherwise, everybody have a fantastic Thanksgiving. We look forward to all the news that comes out. Enjoy the World Cup if you're partaking, and we will talk to you all very, very soon.
Cheers.
Later.
Bye-bye.